and offering coffee and donuts. How's that sound? Huh? Yeah? We go back and set up tables back in there and sit around and have a little less of a service. We're talking about doing that coming up. Oh, there she is. Look at that. Good morning. Ryan's back there today. I might get enough pictures. All right. We're going to go to Matthew chapter 10, and we'll get started here, and then when if I have time, we'll entertain questions. If you want to talk about some things or ask questions, you can do that as well today. Anybody need a lesson sheet? Okay. Matthew chapter 10, verse 16 says this, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents, as harmless as doves." That's an interesting statement. Think about it. Jesus says you guys are sheep, but he said, I'm sending you as sheep into a pack of wolves. So be careful. They can take you out. You realize that? The world can destroy you. They can. Some years ago, I was a chaplain of the county sheriff's department, another county, and so a fellow in my church was the captain of the jail, and he decided to run for sheriff. The sheriff was leaving. Well, the sheriff had picked his undersheriff to be the next sheriff, and a lady, and she was the wife of the head of the dispatch center. And so the friend, he and I went down. We went into Indianapolis, took a course together on how to run for office. At that time, they were talking about running me as a senator, and I decided against it. But so we went and took this class together, and then I put my complete support behind him. Well, I was the head chaplain for the county, and so I was not supposed to do that. But hey, he's in my church. I thought he was going to make a good sheriff, and he did run. He did win, and served 8 years as a sheriff. But in the process, the undersheriff, who was the one that was picked by the sheriff, she and her husband got together, collaborated, and I spent several years trying to build this chaplain corps. We'd come from nothing, and we had 9 chaplains, and we had quite a program going on. Well, they decided to take me out because I was supporting the wrong guy. I bet on the wrong horse. And so they got word. So back then, I had a pager, and they would dispatch whenever there was a scene, whenever there's a problem, like if there was a bad car wreck, or there was a death. There was our chaplain corps did all the death notifications for the county. We did all of that, and so whenever something like that happened, they would text me, and then I would dispatch whatever chaplain was on call at the time. So, needless to say, there was a lot of birthdays missed. There was a lot of, you know what that's like, don't you, Howard? There was a lot of things. It always happens at the wrong time, and but all of a sudden, all of those calls dried up. And we started getting stuff like, somebody's dog died. We need a chaplain. And then word came up that we'd done something unethical, which we had not. Sheriff went on vacation, and the undersheriff killed the whole program. Just shut it down. And I could not get in I had a key. I had a key to the sheriff's department. I could walk in. I had a key to the jail, to the dispatch center. I could walk in anytime, walk right into the sheriff's office. I had complete access. Well, suddenly my access was revoked. I couldn't get to the sheriff. He was gone. The undersheriff had blocked, because I was betting on the wrong horse, in her opinion. They blocked me. And they started running a campaign against us amongst the officers that we were useless, we weren't helpful, we were doing things that were unethical, just a bunch of lies. So I met with all my chaplains, and we tried to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? You know, my inclination, I'm ashamed to say, is to retaliate. And so I had several friends that were in the newspaper, and so, my first thought was, I'm going to let everybody know what they're doing to us. I'm going to be judged by the court of public opinion, was my first inclination. They know what we're doing. The public knows what we're doing. They know who we are. I'm going to tell them what's the crookedness that's going on. Because what had happened was the whole process, the problem started when I got called that there was an officer that had a relationship with a subordinate, and they asked my recommendation, and I told them they need to fire him. And so the captain was going to fire him, and the sheriff and the undersheriff, who both had bad relationships and had relationships with subordinates and ended up divorcing their spouses and marrying their subordinates, did not want that happening. So that was my first black mark. And they took it out of our hands, even though I was the ethics advisor and instructor for the county. It become a problem. So they started moving me off to the side. And I'll tell you honestly, it was the first taste I ever had of political persecution, you might say. First time I'd ever had, you felt helpless. There was nothing you could do. And I realized that time that they could stack the deck and they could put me in jail. At that time, they had enough stuff. I won't go into all. They had all this stuff. They could put me in jail over things I did not do. They had enough stuff that they could put together, and it was like I was helpless. And I thought to myself, why am I so exposed here? I need to go to ground and be quieter. Stop sticking my neck out so far so people don't know who I am, and just live a life quiet, peaceable, And that's what a lot of people do. So we had this meeting with our chaplains. We sat and we talked about it and discussed it, and decided together that the best thing to do was to submit to whatever they said we needed to submit to. Just be humble, quiet, nice, not retaliate, not make any waves. 6 months passed. And there was a lot of trauma going on around Christmas time, Thanksgiving, and I finally got into the sheriff's office. It had been 6 months. We were shut down, kind of in holding pattern. I walked into the sheriff's office. I sat down and I said, look, this is what's going on. Whatever you think we're doing wrong, whatever it is, you need to put us back in the saddle, because it's during this time that the police are being having more trouble than ever. And of course, we had about 260 employees that we worked with. There's 300,000 in that county, so it was a lot of people. It was a lot of issues, a lot of problems going on. So he said, "Okay, we'll let you back in on probation." I said, "Okay, yes, sir, on probation." And it was like just a few months later, we were back full power again, full strength again, and operating. But I remember all the emotion and feeling that, thinking about that. And I thought about that when I read this again this morning, thinking about how that your sheep, and he's sending us into a pack of wolves. See, the way the world is, you guys know this. They're friendly to you as long as you don't cross them. But when you cross them, you know that old feeling of, you take me out, I'm going to take you out. Well, they have that too. And they're going to retaliate. Over petty things. Stupid stuff. Okay? So when you think about witnessing to someone, I mean, I know folks that have gotten fired over witnessing. And really, it's illegal for them to be fired over witnessing. So he says here, be wise and harmless. when you're talking to people. And so when we're talking right now about handling that, we're talking about being ethical in your witness. Remember this. So, well, I have the American right to, yeah, I'm going to tell you. We have free speech. That's true. But not everyone understands that. Huh? Not everyone understands what free speech means. And there are teachers in the public schools that speak up for their faith and get fired. And that's illegal, unconstitutional. And right now we got a Supreme Court that might hear it. It's legal and constitutional for a football coach to kneel in the middle of the field and pray. It's constitutional. He has every right to do that. But football coaches have gotten fired for doing that. Huh? You see, that's a pack of wolves out there. And if they're friendly to you, it's because they're friendly because they want something out of you. You're sheep. And you really don't have, at this point, you don't have teeth to fight back. God hasn't given you that. So be careful. Be careful. Look what it is. I talked about, first of all, the first thing there, I don't even have a number there. Be careful about when you have your discussion, when you're talking about the Lord to people. World Trade Center in New York City was tragically leveled by terrorists. Many well-meaning Christians headed out to Ground Zero armed with tracts and Bibles. It didn't take long for the authorities to block them from coming in. The reason was that they were getting in the way. The rescue personnel were trying to find live people, and the majority of the time they were finding body parts, and they were responsible for tagging them and trying to match them with the right bodies. It was an extremely traumatic time. It was not the time to preach about heaven and hell. It was time to illustrate the love of God. Later, after relationships had been built and questions were being asked, would be the time to deal with the soul. Jesus showed us this when he fed the 5,000 people who were listening to him. Their physical needs had to be taken care of first before their spiritual needs could be addressed. I want to tell you, something that we forget, trauma is a medical problem. And so I was getting trained for, well, I had a FEMA training some years ago, and they brought in the guys that had been at the World Trade Center to explain to us what was going on. And I might have mentioned this before, and I don't want to be gruesome here, but literally people were in there trying to match body parts to names. Toes. Here's a toe. We found a toe. Where does it go? And there was a warehouse. There was more than one, but there were warehouses set up, and these people were coming in and putting them, tagging and trying to put them together like puzzle pieces. It was horrible. So guys are going in there. We're gonna give Jesus to them. Well, that's exactly what they needed. They needed Jesus, but they needed him a little gentler than. This is God's judgment on America, my friends. Somebody trying to match body parts to body parts, if you said to them, God's judgment's right, they're liable to punch you. You're not going to get. So what happened with the rule became they put yellow tape up, and nobody could get across there nobody could get across as a counselor unless they were CISM certified, which is critical incident trauma certified. That's when back when I was getting my certification at the time. The Oklahoma City bombing was the same. That stuff does things to your mind. It does things to you emotionally. And those emotions have to be helped, taken care of. Got what I'm saying? Has to be. So when you want to talk to someone, be careful how you talk to them, when you talk to them, what's going on in their lives. I mentioned recently we had a situation where we had a nurse that was struggling with anxiety, and I don't want to go into detail about it, but more than one, a couple of them. And last weekend was pretty bad. I'm going to tell you, I struggled with some of the things myself. But this one nurse, she couldn't hear anything about any trauma, anything more. You talk about hell with her, you talk about eternity right there. That was not where she was ready to hear that. First thing she needed was to fix the emotions and the feelings, and then we can talk about it. How you present it was so important. Does that make sense? So be careful when you have your discussion. Be wise. Be smart. Timing is everything. Timing is so important. If you're listening to the Holy Spirit and you're letting Him guide you, watch for those open doors. Sometimes the doors are not open. Sometimes it's not the time to talk. Sometimes the time is just to care and show God's love. Be careful about your timing. Be ethical, okay? The second thing I have here is be careful about where you have your discussion about Christ. The checkout lane is not the appropriate place. The lady behind the counter needs to be saved, but she's trying to get a paycheck right then. A waitress might be able to give you a few minutes, but she's on the job. Set up another time to speak to her if you feel she's interested in the Lord. I knew this guy that had this ministry to the beaches, Daytona Beach. And he would take groups of teenagers out to Daytona Beach to pass out gospel tracts. Now, what do you guys think? Huh? What do you think of that? No? First reaction is no. Why? You're taking teenage boys out to yeah, thank you for that. Exactly. You're all thinking it. So how are you going to stand there and tell them about God's love? I mean, seriously, this is a mess. I'll be honest with you. I've been around people who are drunk, and you can get a drunk guy to do just about anything. You can get him to confess to anything. You can get him crying over his sin. It's not hard. But I'm going to tell you something. The next day, he won't remember what he said or did, and that'll become obvious because you'll see him drunk again. Seriously, be careful about where you have these discussions about Christ. The scene has to be right as well. Be ethical. The third thing I have is be time conscious. Don't say to someone, this will only take 5 minutes. I remember having a class one time on a soul winning class. They gave me this class, and it was, they give you a booklet, and the booklet would take you 5 minutes to go through. It's called How to Be Saved. I love Dr. Roland Garlick. He put it together. And he was training people across the country to win souls for Christ. And it really was a nice tool and help people know what to say and how to lead somebody to Christ. But he would say, you knock on the door and you say, can I have 5 minutes of your time? The first question you would ask would be, are you 100% sure you would go to heaven? If they would say no, you would say, can I have 5 minutes of your time to show you how you could be 100% sure? Most people will say, I can give you 5 minutes. That was the idea. Well, then you would take them through the booklet. Well, it depends on how wordy you were. It could take 15 minutes. And the goal, what they said, look, if you get to the end of the booklet and they still don't understand, go back through it again. Now, wait a second. That always bothered me. You told them 5 minutes. They agreed to 5 minutes. If you're going to take more than 5 minutes, you better be upfront about that. Right? Seriously, be ethical. When you know a discussion's aiming for a longer period of time. Look, Paul led somebody to Christ. He took 3-4 hours. One time he preached 6 hours. One time it was all night. You know, when you're talking about somebody's soul, you can't promise them 5 minutes and I got you into heaven. I know groups that were going through toll booths, and they would pull up. They were trying to get, it was a college, and a Christian college. They were trying to get kids to witness for Christ, and I'm for that. But they would say, you got to get these names on your time card of how many people you won to Christ and put their names down here. And so the kids would be coming back to school from vacation or whatever. And, I don't have my time. I don't have my my card full of all the people that was supposed to lead to Christ to be in this class. How do you set a number on that? So they pull up to the toll booth, and they'd reach out and say, if you want to go to heaven, grab my hand. Somebody in the toll booth would grab their hand. This was happening all the time. Grab their hand, and they would pray with them. And they say, okay, you're on your way to heaven. Write their name down. And then off they go. You have a problem with that? Huh? Yeah, you can't set a time on the soul. You really can't. Sometimes people will say a prayer with you just because that's the only way they can get you to leave. Okay. If I say this, will you leave and let me watch my show? Okay, I'll say it. Okay. Well, I've heard this in churches. Sometimes they'll have these long invitations, and after the 87th verse of Just As I Am, we're not leaving until God moves someone. Okay, I'm hungry. I'm coming forward just so the preacher will shut the service down. Right? We be ethical. Can you think of anything else that I haven't touched on here about being ethical when it comes to winning people to Christ? You think of anything else?
That's what you're bringing out. You're bringing out the truth of the word, but you definitely need that truth. You need to present that truth to them.
Yeah.
In a truthful way.
Don't fake anybody. Don't be faking people out.
A lot of people are street smart.
I remember hearing a preacher one time talk about how that we're often faking our neighbors out. We're inside hollering and yelling at each other, and then everybody's dressed for church, and we go outside, go out to church. Hi, everyone, waving to the neighbor. God bless you guys. And, the kids have just been scratching each other's eyeballs out, but God bless you guys. We're going to church. And so faking everybody out. Live an honest life, right? Stop the fights, but, right? Be truthful and honest with your life. That's a good one. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Right. Sure enough. If you say you're going to close, right? If you're done, right? There you go. It's true. Yeah. Whoops. That's good. Anybody else? Yes, Jeff? Somebody's in the front yard mowing, and you see they're working on something, and they've maybe got a deadline, and they're trying to get done. You say hi, and this is not the time, right? Right. Exactly. Yes. Right. We're working on some stuff. I'm gonna give you a little heads up. We're in a couple of weeks we have our church business meeting, and I want you guys to come to that. But I'm gonna give you a little heads up about some of the things we're working on for the new year. We've basically boiled down our mission statement in the church. So basically, we've got three things that we're going to be trying to do, and in each one of those things, we want to be intentional on our programming and special days and all those things need to be on that focus, right? One of the things that I think we need to see in the coming year is more relationship building. I think we need to see more of that. You're going to see that in our culture, bringing someone to church is probably one of the biggest things you could do in getting them to come to Christ. Bringing them to church. Probably one of the biggest things. Where church is supposed to be about fellowship and everything, still, if you can get them to come, and a lot of times, the way you can do that is bring them to church, take them out to a meal afterwards. Or have them come to your house, build a relationship. I'm doing this. Will you come do this with me? Church events and those kinds of things. One of the best ways to reach people in our culture. It is building those relationships. And one of the things I want to emphasize going in the new year is that. How do you think about the people? We do this a lot. We think about the people in your circle of influence that are not in church, do not know the Lord, and you would like them to come to church with you, or you would like them to get saved. You really want them to come to Christ, right? Think about those people you have. Just 2 or 3 or 4. Would they come to your house if they wouldn't come to church? Would they come to your house? Remember Levi? We'll talk about this in a few weeks. I call it the Levi's method of evangelism. He had a dinner at his house and invited all of his work friends to come to the dinner at his house. And then he invited Jesus to speak to him at his house. So you're at my house. This is how we're going to do it. If you come to my house and eat my food, my free food, I want you to understand this is how it's going to be done. That's such a cool idea. The Levi method. We'll talk about it later. But there are multiple ways you can do that kind of thing. Bringing people to your home, getting them used to, hey, let's read a Bible verse together. Here's a verse I got on the table, or a verse on the wall, or a plaque, and bring them into your home and let them break down those defenses a little bit. Let them get them curious, make them curious about the kind of life you're living, why you believe in God. That's the relationship building, right? Okay. Anybody else got any other ethical things they want to talk about? Yes. It's true.
Why are you always so happy? Well, it's my personality, but, that's an opening.
Right.
If you're always like, oh my gosh, my life's awful.
Yeah. Why does anybody want that? Right? It's true, Dawn. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Okay. Very good. Well, hey, that, Mr. Stodden, is the end of my lesson. So, very good. So, but I already announced this at the beginning. If you had any questions, I would entertain them for the next 10, 15 minutes. Anybody have any questions they would like to throw at me? Anything at all? Yes, Tony.
Going back to the story you're telling about the chaplain, I think maybe I just missed something here. I thought you said you helped the sheriff get elected and he was elected.
That's the next guy. The next guy, not the first one. The one I was under to begin with was the one that did all this stuff. Him and his second. He found out I was supporting the next guy for the next run. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was trying to throw. It's hard to. You have to paint the whole picture, and you don't. Nobody's got time for that. Yes. Any Bible questions anybody's got? Yes.
So for the church, the verse, confess your sins one to another, how do you address that for this church, or how you tell people confess your sins one to another? Just talking to, people that are Catholic and they confess their sins, to their priest and whatever, like, well, this is what we do, we're following the Bible. My response would be like, how does your church do that? I'm like, I don't know.
That's a very good question. The question is, In James 5, it says, confess your faults one to another, pray one for another that you may be healed. Effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And she's asking, how does our church do that? We don't do it officially. But I'll tell you how I think that works. And some of that you're going to find in the message this morning, believe it or not. Watch for that because it's in there. The confession is good for, in our culture, we call it accountability. Okay? There's a couple of different ways to do this. One is you find somebody, what I would call an accountability partner, somebody that you feel like you can trust, or somebody that's same wavelength as you, understands, or whatever, or even an older Christian. You'd be wise to find a Christian that's been a Christian for a while, because they really know how life works as a Christian. You know what I'm saying? Find somebody who's been a Christian for 100 years, or whatever, a long time. And tell them, say, look, I need to talk to you about something. I'm struggling with this thing. I have an issue with it. They're going to understand your fight. They're going to understand your struggle and might even have some help for you to get over that. Like, let's say you're having trouble with your mouth. You're having trouble with your thoughts. You're having trouble with your family, with your relationships. The Bible talks about let the aged women teach the younger women how to love their children. So, you're having trouble with your kids, and you're like, boy, I feel like I'm failing. I'm not doing something right. What am I doing wrong? Find someone that's been there, done that, and they can help you. Find, anything at all. That's confessing your faults one to another. It's not standing up necessarily in the church and saying, or coming to the priest and saying to the priest, look, Father, I have sinned, to do all the, that's not, it's talking about finding somebody that can help you be accountable. That's one thing. The other thing is, I have seen this on a couple of occasions. I have not required it, but it's been spontaneous. I'll be honest with you, if I could make this happen, I would, but I don't. Been in a couple of meetings where people have gotten so overwhelmed and their sin is public and everyone knows their sin is public. It's not some private sin that they're struggling with. It's like everyone knows that person's messing up royally, and they realize the entire church knows it. I've seen them stand up at the end of a service and say, I'm really having a problem with this, and I'm sorry, and I need help. This happened the other day. Brother Rick Abrams was here. And he came to the church, and he asked us to anoint him with oil and pray for him. Because he was having trouble with the drugs. He was taking drugs and he almost killed himself. At that point, I think it was about, 4 or 5 months ago? When was it we had him up here? We anointed him with oil. He confessed his faults. And he said, I'm struggling with this. We all knew it. So he said, I'm gonna, I need God to do something. So we anointed him with oil and prayed for him. And he got victory that night. About 4 or 5 weeks later, Rick came to me, and he wouldn't mind if I told you this. I know he wouldn't. He came to me and he was crying. He said, preacher, I slipped and fell. He said, I went out and I drank again. And he said, I know better. And he said, I messed up. He says, messed up my head. And then I explained to him what the gospel says is mercies are renewed every morning. And okay, you fell, you recognize you fell, but quit it. Since that point, he has not done any drugs, any alcohol. He comes to church. He'll come to church on Sunday nights or Wednesday nights. Sometimes he gets here on Sunday morning. He might be coming this morning. But he just cries now. God's given him clarity, his health back. He went to the doctor, got a test. He was dying. He went to the doctor, got a test, and his test came back clear, and his body's healthy. And he just got a new apartment. They had to approve him for the apartment. They called me and asked, and I told them the situation. They gave him the apartment. He's like, he just can't say thank you to God enough, But that was open confession. And, you guys sitting here in the chairs, you're not looking at him saying, anything, I mean, you're grateful that God saved him, right? And forgave him, right? You're not looking down. I'm not judging him. Got what I'm saying? And so those are the different ways I think that plays itself out. I don't think you should have a systematic every Saturday come to confessional and dump all your sins in public. I don't think you do that. I do think you should confess your faults to the Lord daily. But we'll talk about this in the service. But that's what the washing of the feet is all about. It's not actually, we're not supposed to be washing each other's feet physically necessarily. We can. I don't care if you do, but that's not what we don't do that because it wasn't given to us in the church. But if you, the whole washing of the feet is a symbol of helping each other clean up. Because that's really what a church does. That's the point of having a congregation. And I think churches miss that, honestly. We miss that a lot. The point of a fellowship is to make each other stronger and to fix the brokenness and fix the problems we have. Yeah, go ahead.
There's, with the accountability thing, that's like the new buzzword, came around in my generation, I think, a little bit. But there's like a right way and a wrong way, I guess, to get someone in your life to talk to. And I've seen it a couple of times where you need to talk to someone, and you will go and you'll corner someone and you'll be like, I gotta talk to you, I gotta talk to you, you don't know what's going on in my life. And you've got that person pinned down. There's ways to approach like communicating because some people are going to be stronger in the faith and able to handle what you're going to tell them, whatever it is, or whatever you need help with, versus, your best friend. The people that are farther along in life than you are and have seen stuff, have battle scars, and can help you, and like, it's, like for instance, like and this is just hypothetical, but like if Haley and I needed like marriage counseling, we wouldn't go to a single girl or a single guy and say, man, I'm really struggling in my relationship. We talk to someone that has been there and has gone through that and can offer insight. So it's like accountability, like when we first heard about it in school and started talking about it, we were like, oh yeah, I'm going to be accountable with my pals, with my buddies, with that are at the same stage of life. And I think you can to a certain point, but there is that you need people that are farther along in the faith than you are
100%.
to help pull you along from where you are.
If you're listening online, what he's saying is that we need people that are farther along in the faith to help us. And that's accountability doesn't mean just talking to your friend that's in the same place as you are. In case in point, you got a little girl. You think about this as a mom. Oftentimes, moms with kids the same age do a lot of comparison, and it's natural. Where do you buy your formula, your meals, your whatever, your juice, where do you buy all that stuff? And so moms typically gather together and they're like, well, I'm going to do this thing. Well, when it comes to actually teaching your child character, they're the same place you are. Or maybe you want to talk to people who have raised their kids, have been through, because every age is a different stage, a different challenge, right? That makes sense? So anyway, well, let's dismiss a couple minutes early, all right? That's enough for today. We'll take some more questions next week, all right? God bless you.